This should theoretically now be coming through. How is everyone? Can you hear me? We theoretically are live. I'm going to press this button here. There we go. And hello everyone. Can you hear me? Is the sound coming through all right? You can hear me? Very nice. There should be the nice sound of bird song drifting in on the wind. Wait a minute, I'll bring Big Face up. Hello everyone. Hello, welcome to... It's sunny here. It's very nice, isn't it? I hope everyone has been basically getting a chance to go outside and enjoy it. It's going to be a fun one tonight, I think, at the expense of people who live or did live in Gerrards Cross, perhaps, but you know, raising and elevating past trauma. But anyway, this is quite a heavily requested episode of Rail Natter. Actually, people want to hear about the Tesco tunnel and its temporary demise. And so that's precisely what we're going to be talking about this evening. Hello, everyone. Good. I'm glad you can all hear me. Well done. I'm going to wave at you. But first, before we do any of that, I'm going to make my face disappear, and we're going to crack into the news. You know, we're going to get started. I'm not going to dither around this. I think we've probably got quite a bit to get through today. I don't know. Let's see. Let's see how it goes. All of you always predict these to run long. I don't know how long this will run. Let's see. So, I've got my Wacom out ready to scribble on things, because I think there might be quite a bit of scribbling in this episode. Anyway, right, without further ado, the news. Right, yeah, first of things first, the government has made some large promises, specifically promising the fact that they're going to reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, by 78% of 1990 levels by 2035. That's a big promise, and if that happens, that's actually quite a good thing. The trouble is, government isn't actually stumping up any money to do this, or indeed any ambition or plans to do this. And currently, if we whiz forward onto the next thingy, there's a nice graph here from Carbon Brief. You can sort of see, so if I press this button here, this line here, this blue one that's whizzing off along here, is basically current government proposals, and they essentially flatline from this point onwards, because government isn't proposing anything to change, essentially, other than a few things here and there on the fringes. In order to get to net zero by 2050, we need to do the big thick line thing, and that involves hard stuff, because we've done all the easy stuff. We've done all the big, easy, centralized stuff. Namely, we've done energy. We've reduced energy emissions here. Energy emissions kind of shooting down quite dramatically. This is since 1990. We've reduced industry emissions quite a bit. Residential and commercial, maybe not so great. Residential is definitely still an issue, and we've got a lot of home insulating to do. But the big one, and now the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, is of course transport. And that's a really hard thing to change, because it involves behavioural change, and governments hate doing that because it risks people not voting for them. So we've got the hard thing to do now. So without big cash for public transport, so that you can decarbonise lots of things without impacting on people unduly based on their income, without that kind of cash, we're going to be stuck. We're not going to meet those targets. And those targets are legally binding now. They are legally binding according to the Climate Change Act 2008. So, well, let's hold government to account, essentially. Next, let's see. Of course, let's not even worry about Sean Bailey. It's best not to worry about him. Next, embargoed, redacted. Look forward to that tomorrow. Essentially, that's going to be exciting. Look forward to it. What else is in the news? Yes. Content warning that this. I need to get better at content warning, so I put one in, which is that this contains rail crash imagery, but I'm now gonna hide that box. The Carmont derailment near Stonehaven, the interim report is out, and I'll tease it for next week, but basically, essentially that report is already pretty insightful. The information within that is already kind of quite interesting to behold. I'm hoping. In fact, I'm not hoping. You'll find out at the end. Basically, we'll be going through that. We'll be going through that report next episode. So look forward to that happening. Anyway, right. Without further ado. So, in fact, no. Talking of rail crash incidents. Hello to everyone watching. Some nice, lots of you here. Hello, everyone. Talking of rail incidents. The only reason we've got a far better, basically, what's interesting about the collapse we're talking about today is it happened at a funny time in a kind of a weird dark ages period when we just didn't record much about what was going wrong on our railway at all. And we'll kind of talk about that quite a bit. And I think that's probably going to be the main theme of this, or amongst a few big themes. So while we have the Railway Accident Investigation Branch looking at this stuff and coming up with changes, recommendations that the industry can enact to solve the problems that result in these incidents, that didn't happen in the collapse we're going to talk about today. And so that is, I think that's quite interesting. We're going to probably pick through that. But without further ado, all that remains for me to do is really kick off the show. Welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. The InCity 225 fades away. Will I ever remember the fact that if I click away from the slide deck, it will pause the video? The answer is no, of course not. Oh, let's... so here's a picture. I mean, you know, I'm sure a few of you have heard what happened, and I want to kind of, you know, get the fun stuff out of the way immediately. Let's get my miniaturized face up in the corner. Hello, miniaturized me in the corner. Here is a hole, and this hole wasn't supposed to be here. In fact, originally this whole area was a hole. And then someone decided to make it not a hole, and then someone else decided to make it a hole again. There's a tune in there somewhere. Waterhouse, I hope you're listening. Anyway, yes, and we're going to explain why this hole appeared, why the hole was before it disappeared, and indeed why on earth the Tescos was involved. That's the plan for today. Let's see if we can manage it. We're only 6 minutes in, so we're doing quite well. Yeah. Let's talk about the Gerrards Cross Tesco tunnel collapse, shall we? For starters, we need to think about some things. Firstly, the first thing we need to think about is what is Gerrards Cross? Because it's probably worth starting from the very beginning. So let's do just that. Here is a map of the bottom end of the Britain that they have, and here is London with lots of businesses that I like. Let's not worry about all those flags. Anyway, and over here, if you kind of see over here in the kind of the northwest end of that there London they have, kind of on the other side of the Colne Valley, and just generally over here. I wonder where HS2 whizzes through here. Not far off actually. It disappears into a tunnel not far off because in fact, let me just get the old satellite view up. Yeah, it's up here because there's the HS2 tunnel, so it does that. So not far off. Anyway, I digress. This is Gerrards Cross down here where that pin is. It's Gerrards Cross. In fact, that's the Tesco I've pinned. So you can sort of see where it is in relation to London. There it is. It's got its name in lights. In fact, the Majestic Wine there seems to... Oh, Google's just decided... Yeah, Majestic Wine seems to be very popular, given that's the only other business showing here. Strange. Anyway, here's Gerrards Cross. Let's whiz over a satellite view to kind of see what's going on. So, yeah, we've got... it's a fairly... I mean, it looks like a satellite commuting town, part of London, kind of pretty standard. So that's Gerrards Cross. There's people here. Yeah, Mr. Tim Dunn is with us. He can tell us what Gerrards Cross is. Home, once upon a time. Yeah, so you can see it's kind of the M25 is here, and there's the A413 big dual carriageways there, and it's kind of pretty standard for what you'd expect in this part of the country. But actually, perhaps deceptively by what some of the local people and local residents might try and convince you is it's not a very old place. So if I was back to me slides, which is what I'm precisely going to do now, so this is 1900. We're whizzing back in time to 1900, and here is Gerrards Cross. Well, there isn't very much of it at all. There isn't anything, in fact. The Gerrards Cross really refers to this bit here. On I think is this Oxford Road going out here? Probably something like that. Yeah, it's Oxford Road, and then I don't know what this one is, something else. But there's a cross. You see there's a cross, that's Gerrards Cross. That's what it is. That's it. That's all. And so until pretty recently, there wasn't any. In fact, until 1906, that was pretty much it for Gerrards Cross. But if we whiz forward, this mapping is from... Actually, the mapping is from 1937, and it was revised up until 1960. To be honest, not much changed. But fairly rapidly, after 1906, this all appeared. And I whiz back and forth using the nice NLS mapping. Some stuff appeared. In fact, an entire town appeared. Yeah, you can see quite nicely. Gerrards Cross, the whole centre of the town is sort of... The old centre being here, it's now moved over here. And why is that? Well, it's because of this thing here. A railway station appeared. Yeah, it's on the Great Central Main Line, right? And so yeah, that was in 1906. And in fact, if I get the old NLS maps up, so if we whiz in here, you can see the railway station. In fact, if I use my slider, you can see there's a funny lump on top of on top of the railway there, but we'll worry about that in a minute. You can see quite quickly that this, it grew up very rapidly and actually hasn't changed. I mean, okay, there's definitely new residential stuff has appeared, but actually a lot of the residences in Gerrards Cross appeared in a very short space of time, and it doesn't seem to me to have grown much since. This is mapping all from, this is basically all construction from the interwar years, really. And to my mind, if I whiz along here, a bit maybe is appeared since then. So obviously there's an entire Duke's Wood's been eviscerated by new housing. But actually north of that, it doesn't look like much of Gerrards Cross has grown out that much. Who's in the chat? Who can inform me otherwise? Tim can. Tim says it's the sort of town where his fellow residents campaigned to change the postcode from SL9 because they didn't want to be associated with Slough. Well, there we go. Anyway, so there is Gerrards Cross. And if I whiz back to my slides, the reason it exploded kind of turned into being nothing to something is because of these two railway companies. They built a joint station there, I think. So the Great Central plumbed their high-speed line for the time. Their fast Great Central Main Line, the London extension, kind of whizzed through Gerrards Cross, right? But it was a joint station with the Great Western, so the Great Western ran into it. So it's these two who built yon station. Anyway, the history of it is not the ancient history is very interesting, but not necessarily for today's episode. So, oh yeah, and here's kind of what the station looks like now, ish. I took this picture off the Chiltern website, mostly because of the hilarious paint attempt to make this place look blue sky. Why have they photoshopped? You can see the funny line they've done. They've cut around the trees and shaved the top of this tree. But you notice this ominous little thing poking its head over the top of the parapet here. Anyway, this is a strange picture. Why on earth they've gone to the effort to Photoshop blue into it? I don't know. It's very, very bizarre. Anyway, I enjoyed this image, which came up on the Chiltern website. I think Gerrards Cross Station looks a little nicer than this. This makes it look kind of rough. Which probably isn't fair on the place. Anyway, so let us progress. So that is what Gerrards Cross is. The next question is, what is a Tesco's? It's a very, very good question. What is a Tesco's? Every little helps. A Tesco's is a massive supermarket chain that for a long time were the largest retail organisation, or like the second or third largest retail organisation by whatever measure you picked in the world. So they were massive. I think they've been somewhat undermined a little bit more recently, but they're still pretty massive. So here's the state of the UK supermarket landscape as of a year and a half ago or something. And yeah, there's Tesco's at the top. And Sainsbury's following behind with Asda, blah, blah, blah. So there's Tesco. That is what a Tesco's is. Yes. So, but what did Tesco's have to do with Gerrards Cross? Well, Gerrards Cross is quite wealthy, and they didn't have a big supermarket. So Tesco's were like, well, we'll get involved in that. So they made a proposal in 1996 to get stuck in and build a Tesco's. They were like, hooray! And then the local council said no. So the proposals were blocked that same year. I didn't get much further. I'm Scottish, so it's Tesco's. But people who, other people, possibly English people, say Tesco. I don't know. I don't know whether it's a regional thing. Oh, Mr. Tim Dunn says there's a rather good bronze statue of a GCR Navi at the station. Oh, yes, there is. That's right. Around the side. Also, during the 80s, we had magnificent Steam specials through most weekends at... that's very nice, actually. Yeah, there we go. Gerrards Cross, where it all happens. So, the local council have blocked this. I'm whizzing through a lot of very painful local history at this point, by the way. The local newspapers, much fire, much hatred of the idea of a Tesco's appearing. Richard Smith says he reckons that Waitrose Tunnel wouldn't have fallen in. Well, there we go. Anyway, so having been blocked by the locals, good old Prescott hops in, having appointed some independent inspector to decide on the thing. He called it in, and then he said yes in 1998. And so that you'd think after 1998, Tesco's would want to be starting to kind of rake it in as quickly as possible, but no, they dithered for another 5 years. So, why are we putting this Tesco upon a railway? Why indeed? Why are we putting this Tesco on a railway? Well, let's whiz back to Google Maps, shall we? If we have a look around, there isn't much space to do anything. There's so around here, this is kind of protected. So actually, if we go back to here, this is the Common. This is Gerrards Cross Common, and so you're not getting. There's no chance you're building on there. There's nowhere else kind of close to the central business district to actually put anything. They could have put it over. I suppose they could have kind of dumped it over on the side here. But I think they were basically going, well, if we put it on any of the greenfield land next to the M25, people are going to be unhappy. So what is the alternative? What can we do? What's the thing that we can do? Oh, actually, you know what I should have done is get Google Earth open to see if I can trace back in time and see it appearing and disappearing. No, that was an error. Oh well, maybe that's bonus content for later on. Anyway, I'll make another video afterwards and post it in. Anyway, there's you can see the kind of the sort of central business district there by Gerrards Cross, kind of off the old mapping in the 1960s. Actually, I wonder if I've got newer. Have I got any newer mapping? I don't know if I will actually. I think that's probably the largest scale, newest stuff. Anyway, you can see that Tesco's basically like, well, we'll have some of that. We'll shove a Tesco's in next to it. And so they decided the best thing to do would be to put their... And in fact, I've got a picture that's going to demonstrate this reasonably neatly. Thanks, Tim, for sending the high-res version through. Here we are. This is a nice picture showing what's going on. Yeah, so we have... press this button here. You've got a bridge here, and then we've got another bridge here. Nice railway overbridges there. You can see the station is here. There's the station. And you can see this fantastic picture, isn't it? Like, is it pre-Tarmacadam, but still, it's great. Anyway, is this 40s? Is this like late 30s, 40s? Anyway, right, yeah, do at me in. If you want me to spot your comments, by the way, at me in, because then my name appears in red and it's very easy for me to spot things. So, so this area here and kind of, and there, particularly this bit here, and then this bit here. Tim actually did a sketch of this on the Twitters merely moments ago. You can see these areas are sort of central business district, sort of, shops, retail. And so Tesco's clearly went, well, you know what, if we build it here, we're not demolishing anything, we're not getting in anyone's way. It's grand. I mean, apart from the signal box, RIP. It's grand. We can build it there, no one will mind. So we'll put a tunnel over the top of the railway, and we'll put a Tesco's on top of that, and everyone will be happy. No problem. Well, no, that wasn't the case. Everyone got very angry for quite a long time, and there was a lot of toing and froing, and it took 5 years before Tesco's finally managed to get to the point where they had planning permission and shovels could hit the ground. Is it a 4-track station? It used to be it is at this point. Yeah, you can see it's 4 tracks, so it's the 2 fast lines kind of whizzing through, kind of standard Great Central Main Line, kind of nice mile radius curve probably, and whizzing through there nice and straight. Isn't that nice? It's not a high-speed line by today's measure. It's also full, but it was a pretty fast line when it was built. But it also, interestingly, also very heavily used very heavily for commuters, and still is. So, 2003 is when stuff finally started happening. So early 2003 is when the kind of the first physical construction started happening on site, and it was done by a company called Jackson. Here's Jackson. They still exist. Jackson Civil Engineering Limited or something. They were bought up by Babcock and then spat out again in a kind of a management buyout. It's all a bit strange, but anyway, here is Jackson, and they were the ones in charge. And they worked with designers. Who was it? It was, I think, White Young Green were the main consultant designers, which is interesting because White Young Green. This is where I start. This is where I get sacked, isn't it? White Young Green didn't. I think they got. Was it Amy? Did White Young Green end up with Amy? Anyway, Andy Savage is saying. Yes, it was insisted on. Railtrack insisted on a 4-track tunnel width. Yeah, because in 2003, or at the time that it was being planned, between 98 and 2003, it was Railtrack, not Network Rail. Thanks, Andy. Andy Savage is in the chat, by the way. Hello, Andy. One group, Tim Dunn says, one group of residents occupied a shop called Yes to Tesco. Another group occupied a shop set up as Down with Tesco. So I'm picturing like Molotov cocktails being flung across streets and stuff, and like kind of all-out warfare. But with sort of you know, curtain twitchy type people doing it. That for me is peak entertainment. But the extent to which it was just a bunch of people kind of annoyed by the idea of construction work and a big Tesco's for no reason appearing in the middle of their town, and also kind of somewhat splitting. Yeah, white and green was bought by Amy. Thanks, Gary Keener. Crikey, all the biggies are in tonight. There were placards, there was pointing, there were angry letters in parish newsletters. It was frankly bloody exhausting, says Mr. Tim Dunn. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, it does give you an idea. I can kind of imagine there'll be people who I guess are just like, the Tesco's is inevitable, just let it happen and get the fuss over with, and others desperate to stop it happening. An extent of people thinking that, you know, Gerrards Cross was some sort of magical rural idyll. Probably a lot of others with reasonably pragmatic feelings of the construction disruption is going to be a real pain in the backside. Anyway, so what are Jackson going to do about this? The fact there's a railway they've got to put a tunnel over the top of, and then a Tesco's on top of that. Well, Andy makes a good point. Railtrack have already said it needs to remain 4 tracks. So how do they do that? Well, they go for something. They want to go for lightweight, quick construction. The quick is the aim of the game. They could build a huge concrete box and then around the railway and build on top of that, but that would be time-consuming. It would involve closing the rail for long periods of time. It would involve complex formwork. It would just be really disruptive. So they need something quick that they can almost lift in on top of the railway in kind of during the night. Without too much disruption to the railway. And so they develop, this is the approach that they develop. So here's our railway and it's clay cutting. So they put in some piles. Actually, you know what I need to do? I need to change my pen to be white. Let me just change the color to white so I can scribble on things. So basically these, I haven't actually drawn it in here, but these are kind of piled foundations here. With I'm not quite sure what type of piling. It's not hugely relevant. And then on top of that, they add a 3-pin arch formed of. Actually, it's formed of. So it's these pieces that kind of look like this. There we are. Kind of pieces that kind of look a bit like that. And they're about what? They're not hugely thick. They're quite very slender pieces. They're about what is it? I think it's about 2 meters. This way, I think this is about, what's the height? I think there's about 8 to 9 meters, something like that. They're around 8.5 meters. And this relies on fairly straightforward engineering principles of having a pin here. So a pin here, and a pin here, and a pin here. So you might be thinking, well, what do you mean pin? But essentially, by having this as a rigid piece, this here is a rigid piece, this is a rigid piece, the calculations for this become quite straightforward. The way that the forces manifest, kind of loading kind of coming in here, and then the way the loading then transfers down through the arch. It's reasonably straightforward to calculate, and so it's fairly straightforward. It's also quite a light structure. So that was the logic. Let me get big face up so I can show you how arches work. Very quickly. No, that's no face. That's no use at all. Here is a piece of cardboard. And here's an arch. Let me just there's an arch. So arches work basically by. So you can see, what am I doing here? I'm holding these together. And much like Barlow's arch at St Pancras, you need if you've got a big arch, you need to kind of attach it. Either you do that by pinning it underneath, or you do it by having big. In this case, they essentially pinned it, but. In a temporary state anyway, or you have sort of big abutments that kind of hold it down and kind of weigh it down, or you have a series of arches that kind of match together, so you've got a few of them next to each other, and then you've got a big structure at the far end, lots of things like that. But basically, as load goes on the top, which is in this case is my big chin, you can see, well, you can't see because I'm holding it really badly, but I can put loads of force in there, and actually it's quite strong. It's quite strong, nice circular, the loading is quite, arches are good, they're nice, simple, straightforward, structural type. Anyway, let's go back to miniaturized face. So, having put this arch in, this I mean, you can't put a Tesco's on top of this, so this is only the first part of the puzzle. So then what they plan to do is essentially put a load of granular fill. So this here, which is in my sketch, is a load of granular fill, and so they fill this up with kind of carefully designed granular fill, and then on top of that they'd put sort of more standard stuff. They put a load of like ash and sort of soil, and then on top of that you put your Tesco's. There they are, Tesco. So that would go on top of that. So that was essentially the logic. So they'd go from you put your piles in, you put your arch pieces in, then the granular fill, and then the sort of fill on top of that, and then the Tesco's. That was the logic. And here's a picture. I'm rationing some pixels. Here are the pictures of. Here's a picture showing these pieces. You can see the pieces. Here's one here. You can see there's a whole one there in white. You can sort of see there's the piece. And sort of line these up. And I think the whole thing, so the length of the whole thing was about, was it 310 meters? Or maybe 300, maybe 330 meters? Something like that, around about 300-ish meters. So quite long. That's quite a long space. And essentially, they were going between these overbridges. So from one overbridge to the other overbridge. And indeed, yeah, you can sort of see in this picture where they've finished placing all of the pieces. So these two images kind of showing. You can see here's someone having a nice time waiting for the train. Here is one of the overbridges. So here it is, and then you see the other one in the distance. So you can see Spandrel there, and then the other one there. It's about 300 meters between them, and you can see this arch. You can see actually at this point it's got it's kind of quite flat shape. It's not hugely circular at this point. Anyway, plenty of space underneath. This annoying alignment that you get when you have rationalized track. Just I don't know why they didn't straighten it between. Anyway, never mind. So you can sort of see what's going on. So far, happy days. Right, there's some questions. Matt Reed asks, has this tunnel option been used anywhere else? Yeah, this had been used throughout the 90s, actually. It was developed as in the mid-90s as a system for creating tunnels. It had been used in Europe quite a bit. Yeah, it wasn't it wasn't a crazy thing. Granular fill. Sorry, Robin Weston. Just sort of fill that. Fill. So by which I mean kind of like, rather than just stuff you've dug out the ground, it's stuff that's kind of been carefully granular, kind of graded fill. So it's got the right, the pieces of stone and aggregate in there, and the stuff. So it's sort of like the stuff you use for hardcore under a road. So it's kind of prepared material that essentially has, because it binds quite well, it adds structural properties to the overall thing. So yes, Chris Jackson, part of the challenge was adding the fill balance each side to keep the forces on the tunnel symmetrical. We shall get to that. Matt Reed, is this modern cut and cover without the cut? No, because as Tim says, very much was a cut. So that there was already a cutting. That picture we put up earlier, this one, you can see the cutting here. So you can see we've got our cut shape. The cut's already happened. So the cut's already happened to give us this sort of this space, and this is then where the pieces were added. Sort of the arch, that 300 meters of arch with the kind of the bits was then added in the middle here, and then the idea was that would get filled in, and you put your Tescos on top. That's where your Tescos would go. That was the logic. So here we are. So this is kind of a view of what's going on, and here's another view. And you can see here that you can see just above here the Tescos have started to appear. So there's clearly some stuff going on. The structure of the Tescos appeared. But you'll also notice something weird has happened. This picture here shows that there's a gap. There's a gap. Why is there a gap? Yes, why indeed is there a gap? So the reason there is a gap is because something bad happened on Thursday the 30th of June 2005. The bad thing that happened is this is what happened. It fell in. It collapsed. It collapsed with a driver sat in the station behind. So basically a driver with this view was sat here and saw all this lot just kind of plummet in and make a right old mess. I think it was about 7:30 in the evening? Was it in the evening? I think it was. All this lot crumbled in. I think then the driver reported it, and then there was the signal then reported an emergency stop, and a train had to do an emergency stop coming the other way, but no one was harmed in the making of this minor rail disaster. Yes, a date, the 30th of June 2005. So it collapsed in, made a right old mess. You can see that it wasn't just, so you can see it's not just these kind of failed units, but actually you've got failures up here as well. You've got sort of serviceability failures. Of the actual arches they're kind of bowing in. This is bad, folks. This is very bad. Cut, cover, and collapse. The famous 3 C's. Yes. So here is a better picture of what I have nicked off of the internet and someone else's scanned newspaper footage image. Anyway, I have no guilt. So here is the tunnel entrance. So at this end you can see this is the far end. So the station's at this end. The picture we were just looking at was kind of looking this way. Yeah, you can see looking this way. You can see the Tescos mostly built, and you can see where the collapse has happened. And what's interesting here is having a look at the fill. And I've got a better picture that shows it later, but you can kind of see that there, particularly around here, there's a bit of a gap in the fill. There's more fill on this side. That's something to note. You'll notice that this is the area where this has all been kind of filled in. This has already been kind of finished filled in. They've put their fill material in, and then you can see at this end over here, there's no fill. They haven't done any filling. You can see it's still the exposed concrete rings, and they're in the process of filling it in on the approach. They built it at this end. This end they built it first because they needed to build the Tescos, so it made sense to start at that end because then the Tescos could start being built before everything else was finished, because this is just a car park. And the kind of construction went this way, so they kind of added fill, and the fill was being added. You can see this bit is where they'd got to. Yes. No, this method is still used, Matt Reed. It's a sound method. The method is essentially sound. It's light. It's pretty lightweight construction type, but it's not, fundamentally the engineering was not that much of a problem behind it. But it did rely on, it relied on quite a complex temporary load state, which we'll get to momentarily, and it relied on some fairly careful construction while the kind of those tunnel lining rings were still in place. So we'll get to that. Anyway, there's a nice overhead picture, I think, fairly clearly showing what's going on. Let me go. Andy Savage has a couple of pics from inside the tunnel that inspectors took at the time. Oh, Andy, that's exciting. Andy, send them on. If you can, pop them on Twitter. In fact, stuff it. Pop them on Twitter. I'm sure no one will mind. The HSE, as we'll get to, don't give us stuff about this. They want it to just go away. Again, we'll get there. Right. Anyway, here are some other pictures of collapses. These are bad. This is bad. You don't want this to happen, folks. Actually, quite neatly, you can see the two different types of fill. So you can see. Let me get my. Let me change color. I think you can see it. So at this point, you can see this level here, and I'm drawing it in white. You can sort of see the line where the different fill material is. So you can sort of see where the concrete is. There's the ring, and sort of see where it's given up. And then the sort of fill material here is that granular fill. That's the granular fill there. And then on top of that is the material, is the kind of the ash and the material they were going to build the Tescos and the car park on top of. So that's gone in. And you can see here, yeah, again, it's gone, it's collapsed. This isn't good. Now, so I'm not going to put them in any other pictures. We'll have on Twitter. We can enjoy that later. But I think broadly these pictures kind of make the point. So, and again, I've got another picture here, and they've already started to excavate away the material. So interestingly, you can see, and again, you can see there's more material on this side than there is on this side. You can see, so here they kind of, this is where the work was still happening. Kind of they hadn't done the filling. This is where they had started doing the filling. You can see they've done some stepping of the earthwork so that basically they had contiguous layering when they were putting it in. Anyway, and you can see where they've filled it up. You can see the level to which it was filled up there. So actually, I think in the previous picture, is it this one? Oh no, maybe it's the next one. Basically, you can sort of get an idea of what was going on. But we're going to go in a little more detail about what happened. Why did it collapse? Well, let's discuss that, shall we? Hopefully everyone's here and still with us. Let's talk about the Health and Safety Executive. So the Health and Safety Executive at the time were the ones in charge of doing investigations into things like this and letting us know what had happened. And they did indeed start an investigation in 2005. And in 2017, which is sometime later, there was someone sent in a. I don't think I'm. Oh, it's fine. It's basically, you can Google it anyway. I've not redacted. Ignore my non-redacted redacteds. That's fine. No one could see Mr. Kinsley's name here. It's fine. Anyway, it's on. It's actually your public data, so I've not doxed anyone. It's fine. So, what is the response that they've HSE have come up with here? Well, the response they've come up with is. The response they've come up with is, we ain't telling you. So this was in 2017. Question 1, here's question 1. What is the current status of the investigation? Well, they finished the investigation in 2015. Oh, that's good. Great. So, that's a 10-year investigation. That's a long investigation, but, surely the report is out there, right? So you can read it. Engineers can understand what went wrong. We can understand where the failures were, learn from them. Question 2. What is stopping the completion of the investigation and the publishing of the report? Oh, well, here they are restating that the investigation was completed. Well, okay, so the investigation was completed. Why is it not in the public domain? HSE is considering publication of a draft report, but this remains subject to the resolution of legal issues, and as such it cannot be confirmed whether that report will be made public. A decision will be made on this shortly. Spoiler alert, that report still doesn't exist in the public domain yet. So we don't actually know what happened. There's only reasonable guesswork. Andy Savage, however, is in the chat. Gary Keener also points out that it's worth noting that HMRI, Her Majesty's Railway Inspectorate, had been subsumed into the Health and Safety Executive. It was a very unhappy marriage, which was only resolved by the creation of the RAIB, the Railway Accident Investigation Branch. Yeah, very good point. So lots of... Donald Brannigan's asking what I mean by ash. I literally do mean ash. Ash is quite a useful civil engineering material. We use it all over the place. Google structural ash fill. You'll sort of you'll get some responses, Donald. The bad news is, and Andy Savage perhaps can enlighten us on some of the as I go through the explanation, he can perhaps tidy up and enlighten us on or correct me on some of the things. But basically, I'm piecing together what I've found in various kind of snippets, mostly off the New Civil Engineer, most out of New Civil Engineer magazine, actually, where there's a reasonably good detailed explanation of what they reckon happened. Anyway, also what's interesting is question 3, which is quite funny. Just going into question 3. There's question 3. How many health and safety executive investigations have been active longer than this one? Again, they're saying, it's no longer active. Well, they're saying there are currently no active investigations that are longer than... Yeah, so none is the answer. None. This is an absolute embarrassment that is still not in the public domain. It's an embarrassment that the investigation took 10 years. Just absolutely shoddy. And I dare say it's because of all of the... a huge amount of it will be related to that contentious planning, that 5-year planning process, and Tesco's desperately not wanting to risk anything that's going to delay or potentially stop their Tescos from appearing above. That's my guess. Also, there'll definitely be major claims going on in terms of the civil engineering side of things. Like Jackson's presumably got the absolute boot shoved in terms of claim. They'll have counter-claimed. It'll have got really ugly. Here's question 3. Someone's got their brush out and is holding up a carpet, says Matt Reed. Gareth Williams is asking, was that subsuming as a result of the coalition government's bonfire quangos? No. That was long before that. We're talking subsuming was happening as a result of various New Labour initiatives, and then the splitting out was recommended as a result of the Cullen report into Ladbroke Grove, I believe. Is that the right way around? Yes. RAIB. Yes. Let me just... This is as ever, these are professional productions. Yeah. So it was basically off the back of Ladbroke Grove Cullen report. I do know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I forget, We all have deep imposter syndrome, don't we? Anyway, right, so... here's some pictures again. And I think this picture's good, particularly this one here, because... Anyway, I've got red. So here's our depth of fill. You can see that there's actually quite a lot of fill has been heaped. And you can see by this angle of repose here, this isn't collapse fill, this is the fill that was naturally placed. There's a lot of fill heaped up here, right? A lot of fill. And again, this picture up here, this is before the collapse. You can see there's a lot of fill up here, and not very much fill down here. Lots of fill here, not very much fill here. You see a big gap in fill. There should be fill here. This is bad, folks, and we're going to explain why. Post-Cullen that set up RAIB. Yeah, that's it. So Matt Reed asks, do I think we'll ever see the report? Well, I don't think we will, no. Andy Savage. Andy says he was deputy chief at RAIB at the time. They'd just set up, but had got no legal powers until after this. Yeah, we'll get to that date. So they could not formally investigate it. It's fascinating, absolutely. Some fascinating sort of empire-building politics going on in amongst here. Really interesting. Andy, yeah, keep an eye on Andy's chat. Andy's comments in the chat, by the way. So there's some really good. He'll have some really good insights into this, no doubt. So anyway, those are some pictures that I think are quite telling. So I'm going to start scribbling. Like there is no tomorrow. Let me get some colours up here. So, Actually, I'm just going to go white because it keeps things nice and simple. Or am I? No, I'm not going to go white. Let's go yellow. Yeah, let's go... how's this? Is this... Ella, check my... Is this nice and clear? That's fairly clear, isn't it? So, we've already seen that we know that... basically, the way this arch works is that it needed to have lots of fill... Oh, that's absolutely impossible. Let's go for a light blue. Let me go for... Golly gosh. Let's go for this light blue. I think that... Is this now clearer? Let's have a look. Yeah, that'll do. So, in order for this arch to... basically, it needs to have lots of fill here... and here, there we are, to make sure that to essentially provide the uplift force, so that this there's essentially a resistance to the fill that was then added from above up here. So basically, the first thing that needed to happen is the start needed to have there needed to be fill being added here. This needed to be filled up, and this needed to be filled up. So to build this thing, having put the concrete rings in, concrete rings on their own are fine, but there's sort of quite a complex series of quite a complex process of loading these arches to make sure that they don't collapse under loading, and essentially filling these up first was critical. Once you'd filled these up to a certain extent, you could then start adding fill to the top. You could start adding fill, and it's more complicated than I'm making out, because actually you had to add, essentially to provide any footing load down here, you did need to add a layer of total, kind of a surrounding layer of granular fill to distribute some of the loads beyond the arch. So you did actually need to have this, then you could add this. And then only once you got this sort of fill could you then start adding sort of more layers here and here. And then once you sort of kind of raise those up, then you could sort of, then the top goes in, and then blah, 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 and then you fill up to the top. The issue is, as we've seen in some of those photos, so they'd added fill down here, they'd added a bit of fill, and they'd added a bit of fill down here. But actually, quite rapidly, they'd started adding substantial volumes of fill up here. Now, I don't know why that is, and until the report is provided, we won't know why that is. But I think it's from the data we've seen, and from kind of fairly the reports, and Andy Savage might confirm this in the chat, so you'll have heard it here first if Andy can chip in. I'm really hoping you can. By this loading at the top, it meant that the load coming down here at the crest of the arch was not being balanced by the kind of the little load. So these essentially wasn't being balanced by the kind of the force that was happening here. So there wasn't enough force on the arch here to actually balance out the loadings happening at the top. Hopefully that makes sense. Where can I get my massive face up? Possibly my large chin. So is this going to make sense? So essentially, so you needed to have the loading here to stop the crest from kind of bowing in like that. So essentially, you're kind of almost front loading. There we are. Front loading like that to sort of make sure that there's an upward force to resist. So you're essentially loading in this side where my hands are to provide an upward force that then resists the loading that comes in from the top of the fill, which is my eyeballs there landing on top, which then means that your arch would then be, once it was then surrounded by fill and kind of, essentially you could then load everything as you wanted to on top, and it would all be fine and stable and happy. Unfortunately, because they didn't load much up at the top here, that arch started bowing. It was already starting to bow, and eventually, essentially, with too much fill at the top, in it went. Bad times. I'm very pleased to see Andy Savage say, what you're describing is what I can recall, so that's reassuring, essentially. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so that's basically what happened for the collapse to occur. Hopefully that makes sense. Right, let's go back to my miniaturized face. So then the question is, what happened next? Ella, my chin is my chin really co-host of the show? It is large. I'm sorry. My forehead also. There's the receding hairline and anyway. What happened next? Well, on the 20th of August 2005, which was how long after there's that? That's some months. The railway was declared safe for services to resume. So that's months of closed railway, months of payment from the construction company and from Tesco's to the railways, rightly so. I think originally, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, originally the budget for this was 20 million in those days' prices. I think at the point where they reopened the tunnel to run, it had reached 50 million. So that's clearing out the collapse and possibly also the payments and maybe some of the claims. And I don't know what I'm about to describe next. I don't know what the later prices are for the final thing. Might have been on. I mean, I don't think it's actually included anywhere. I don't think it's actually. I don't think there's any detail in terms of what the total cost is. Yeah, there's nothing on kind of final costs. It's all been kept very, very hush hush. So, there you are. So engineers had kind of confirmed that it was fine, and indeed the health and safety executive, at least they did publish one thing, which is that Chris Jackson says closure was roundly 7 weeks. Crikey. So here's the HSE. Here's Adrian Shooter receiving a letter saying your railways, we've opened the railway again for you. So the HSE said, yes, it's safe, but that's about the only thing. This is basically the only document they published in relation to it. Actually, Alan Spence, I think, follows me too. Alan is on Twitter. I should have messaged him for this. Alan, hi, if you're watching. It'd be interesting to get your take on all this. I'm sure you did want to publish the things that you looked into. Anyway, so that letter happened. But here, this is basically how the railway was run. It was run with a pointless arch running over the top, and a big gap, and then another pointless arch running over the top with nothing above it. Or rather, a half-built Tesco's above it. So, not ideal. Not very good at all. So, what was that? They use Windows. That's it. They're using Windows. Yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with Windows, Ella. I'll use Windows. Anyway, right. Jackson. Let's go back to Jackson. Not Chris Jackson, who's in the chat. Gareth Williams is pointing out that 20 million is about double. It's about half of what it is in today's money. So it's about 40 million then, and then it went up to 100 million. Crikey. Because Ella, it's in C work because back in those days everyone stored stuff in just their C drive. That was the way of things. It was back in the old. That'll have been a computer running Windows 95. Let's face it. In fact, Alan can probably confirm to us exactly what version of Windows he was using. Anyway, we digress. So, did Jackson get left to finish and mop up their work and tidy everything up? No, they didn't. They were binned off the job pretty rapidly. White Young Green also binned off the job. Yeah, the reason I said I potentially get sacked is because White Young Green went to Amy, but a lot of people in White Young Green ended up moving over to a company called Hyder Consulting that then got subsumed into Arcadis, which is where I work. Hi. Anyway, yeah, Jackson binned off the job. They didn't fold up, but I imagine that they would have to deal with some pretty substantial claims, frankly. Enter COSTAIN. COSTAIN got involved with their Thunderbirds logo. Here it is. It's looking very Thunderbirds. Boom, 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 boom. Bits appearing and stuff. Anyway, 2005 is a bit late for Windows 95. Not in the public sector, it ain't. So anyway, there's COSTAIN. COSTAIN get involved. And what do they do to fix it? Well, they propose to kind of essentially retain. Can you hear the bird song? It's nice, isn't it? Basically, they propose to retain where they can the existing arches, and they place some new arches around the top for strengthening. They then, I think it's an in situ pour. So that would involve the reinforcement mesh over the back of the concrete arch and an in situ pour. Which means I think they'll have in the gap there's about 30 meter. Oh no, there's about a 30 meter gap. Let's go back to the picture. So the width, the length of collapsed tunnel was. Let's go back to the picture. This bit was about 30 meters. The length that they then had to demolish to make safe was about twice that. It was about 60 meters. So there's a 60 meter gap. But for the most part, they essentially proposed to put this in situ concrete casting around it. They then proposed to put in some piles in around it to. Let me just change my colour again. As you can see, I'm kind of pro-moving this. Where are we? So these piles went in here. Pop in a pile. A pile is just like it can either be a kind of a single column put into the ground, or it can be like a kind of a linear thing popped into the ground. In this case, it was sort of sheet piling, I think. Or no, it wasn't sheet piling. It was board piling, but in a line to form essentially a sheet. I think I'll show it in a picture in a minute. And that was essentially so that when they piled in the stuff behind here, they could pile in anything they like without affecting the load behavior of the arch. So essentially, it reduces the stresses on the arch. So as we can see, so that gets filled in, and essentially that isolates this. So it means that this sort of area here, this dashed area, becomes isolated from everything else. They don't have to worry about what else they're going to kind of what fill they do. It makes it easier loading wise. Basically, their belt and braces it as much as they could. So then the fill goes in, and this time they used, rather than using granular fill and sort of different types of fill. Actually, in this situation, they just used they did use a mixture of things, but they were using sort of foamed. They were kind of using foamed concrete, so it had air pockets in it, so that it reduced its mass, its density, so that so whilst it still had some of broadly the same structural properties, it had reduced overall mass, which then in turn reduced the loading, so you kind of got less loading in your arch, which is fine. So that means that it's kind of more robust, more predictable. The key thing with this is that what went wrong was the temporary loading situation. So by simplifying that, by making it less critical, by making it kind of less, you have to be less finely tuned about it, they were making it less likely they were going to throw the Tescos on the railway again. Anyway, and here's some pictures of them doing just that. Here's the gap, I think. And you can see they've got the piling going in. And actually, so what they've done is actually in my diagram here, I've shown these piles as being kind of miles up in the air. But actually, what they've done is they've piled to like here, and then it looks like they've used dense gabion baskets, sort of the things where you have stone in there. They look like you use kind of gabion baskets above, sort of as a means of retention. So the gabion baskets, which I think you can see in this picture, yeah. Oh no, that's not. I speak nonsense. Oh, maybe it is gabion basket, but that to me looks like reinforcement mesh. Actually, so no, maybe it isn't gabion baskets. It might be reinforcing mesh that they'll then in situ concrete around. So yeah, that seems fairly reasonable. But you can see the piling here, and I think there's another picture which shows the piling even better. That you can see them placing in these new. Well, these look like these are. So actually maybe they put the same segments in. So they replaced the segments like for like in that gap, and then they put the in situ pour concrete on top. That makes some sense. Oh yeah, you can see them heaving them in. And oh yeah, here's a nice picture showing things a bit more clearly. So they're still excavating at this point. Here you can see where they're actually, this is an earlier picture, but the railway running underneath. Shooter's getting his turbos running back and forth. You can see they've kind of pile. You can see the piles that have been driven, circular piles have been kind of driven in one by one here. There might be CFA piles, whatever. Any civil engineering nerds in here can kind of update me on that. I'm not a structural, civil, or a foundation engineer. Anywho, so that's it. That's how they did it. And then having done all that concrete, that kind of the new fill, eventually they could put the stuff on the top and build the Tescos. We reached November 2010, and Tesco's opens. Hooray! Possibly. Or if you're a local who's had to deal with all the disruption, boo. Anyway, Tesco's opens. And here it is. This is a nice view of the Tescos. There's Tesco's. There, Tesco's. And you can see they've built a nice, they've kind of engineered a nice kind of ICE style tunnel portal at the station end. It's a bit less glamorous on the other end. So actually what they've done is buried the old bridge in here, which I have to say I'm not such a fan of burying old structural forms because there's a load of hidden critical elements now inside this. But anyway, whatever. If Bill Harvey was watching, he'd be very unhappy about that. So they essentially filled in that bridge, entirely covered it up to be forgotten in the annals of time, made this nice portal here, this lovely portal, and then built your Tesco's on top. Hey presto. There it is. There's a nice tunnel, a train arriving at Gerrards Cross. It's all looking quite smart. Do the station buildings exist? Are the station buildings still there, just behind shot? Is Tim still watching? Andy Savage is saying, must have been a pretty substantial wall to get the crane there. Yes, agreed. It would have. So it might have been that they made a more substantial wall on one side for the surcharge of the crane, and then did less on the other side. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I no evidence, so I couldn't see. Anyway, yeah, no Photoshop involved in this picture. It's true. Mr. Tim Dunn says boo. In relation to something, is that in relation to the lack of station? Simon Wadsworth said they may have used shotcrete. It's trying to cast concrete against a convex curve, not easy. No. I think they didn't use shotcrete. They did use cast in situ. I think. I can double check that now. Wait for it. Anyone expecting a professional production, I am sorry to disappoint you. So let's see. So there's a really good new civil engineer piece on explaining how they fix it, kind of how they're fixing the issue. So there we go. Crikey. I mean, there's a lot of detail. Yeah, they're talking about kind of in situ concrete and behind. Yeah, there's a really detailed... If you want the detailed civil engineering stuff, there's a... yeah, you can go in and do some Googling. And basically, the new civil engineer... there's a new civil engineer piece in the archive from 2009 that goes into some decent detail about the engineering, if you so fancy it. But I figured it's somewhat adjacent to the task, the issues at hand, because the things I'm interested in are some of the management issues going on here. Oh, you've already signed up that bingo square, Gaff Williams. I'm sorry, Chris Jackson. There was a buried viaduct inside an embankment on the Dover-Folkestone line which collapsed a few years ago. Yeah, it was. That was, to be fair, that was a bit of a timber thing, but it did cause substantial disruption and expensive rebuilding. It's not the best to do that. Anyway, here's some images from VisiV showing what's going on. There you can see the nice portal. It's quite a nice portal there. It's quite nice, isn't it? There's the Tescos, and basically between the Tesco, so all of this work is essentially for a Tesco's of some size and mostly car park. So they've buried the railway essentially mostly for a car park. Let's get Google Maps up again to remind ourselves. If I zoom in on here, yeah, look, it's mostly car park. It's a bit of Tesco's, mostly car park. Was it really worth it for what is basically just a big car park? Surely that Tesco's really need to be there? I don't think it does. I'm getting in the no to Tesco's shop with all the grannies upset about the idea of Tesco's happening, and I'm getting hold of the Molotov cocktail and I'm chucking it out the window because I don't think the Tesco should be there. There's no point to it. Yeah, Tesco's have their place. They reduce the cost of goods for, overall Tesco's is probably a good thing because it reduces the cost of goods for people in ways, and it's quite efficient, and efficiency is also kind of environmentally friendly. But the flip side of that is that they encourage more consumption, so that undermines that somewhat, probably. PhDs send them this way. Anyway, I'm not convinced it was a great idea in this situation anyway. However, what else is going on? Yeah, the other side. So that's one side. The other side, you can see the bridge is still in place. There's the old bridge, and then there's the new portal behind. Slightly less elaborate because it's hidden by the old bridge. Anyway, there we are. And here you can see some, what is this, mock Tudor. Love it or hate it. There we go. And some squarer things have appeared here as well. And more car park. Aren't you glad there's even more car park appearing? Isn't it wonderful? Oh, yes. 2008, view of the construction is on Street View. Oh, really? That's interesting. Oh, really? Actually on... Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Let's do this. And where's our Street View, man? Oh, I wonder. Can I go in here and have a look? Can I press... Where's the time thing? Yeah, there we are. Let's go to 2008, yeah. Oh, yeah, there it is. Nice. Yeah, true facts. Yeah, you can see them working on it very much. Yeah, they've got considerate constructors and all that jazz. Anyway, very nice. Good shout. Anyway, right, what else am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about the health and safety executive again. Tim John says, nobody in Gerrards Cross actually really buys food here anyway. Most have au pairs or Deliveroo now. Yes. Yes. The tale doesn't end there from my perspective, because if we dive into more freedom of information requests, there was another one pretty recently, March 2021 in fact, and it's asking for a copy of the investigation into the tunnel collapse. And basically, what have they said? Where are we? Let me go. Oh, you know what's funny is I don't think this is actually the image that. Well, let me go in here. Tesco tunnel, and let me get. I think it's this one. Yes, this is. No, that's number 3. So I want this one here. Oh no, I don't think that is. Oh yeah, it's. Oh, maybe I did it in. Yeah. Oh, that's it. It's literally this. It's one line. Sorry, I was getting distracted because I thought there was more to it than that. There is not. There is just one sentence in here that actually is making reference to the... All right, let me get my pen ink colour back to red. This is it. They've gone from there are legal issues, we're not publishing it, to, yeah, we just aren't publishing it, folks. Yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening. So that's very nice then, isn't it? Just so the HSE... Do better, HSE. Find that report, publish it. For what purpose is it not being allowed to... Or surreptitiously publish the reason why you're not allowed to. But there's probably a giant flipping non-disclosure agreement associated with it, and maybe an injunction about them even maybe there's a super injunction on it. They're not even allowed to mention the fact that the report or why the report isn't getting published. Anyway, it's pathetic. The engineering community needs to understand what happened so that we can do better, frankly. So thankfully, and relevant to the fact that we were talking about Carmen earlier, thankfully, and indeed as Andy Savage has pointed out, in 2005, October 2005, RAIB got their legal powers and took over. Wait a minute. RAIB got their legal powers and took over the ability to investigate failures, property damage, crashes, derailments, other fatalities. They got the power to make those investigations, and they do so independently and in a way that, and they publish those so they're open for all to see. Yes, maybe you could argue that they can be a bit slow. They could probably benefit from being better resourced, as is true for so much on the railway, but I think they do a good job. Yes, so what's the point of the report if it's not accessible? Well, indeed, Gregors, what is the point? Owen O'Neill asks, so who owns the ongoing maintenance liability for the new tunnel, and how much did Tesco pay the railway for the land? Yeah, I don't know, actually. It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to those things. In terms of ongoing maintenance liability, what is it for overbridges? I think overbridges generally fall to the leasehold, so I think it would be Tesco's who's in charge of that. But I don't know. They might well have said, actually, Network Rail, can you have it? I don't know what the arrangement is there. Any structures, people? If the LNW South structures RAM is watching, do you own that structure, or is it someone else's? Let us know. Right. What was I on about? Waffling on about something or other. Oh yeah, what about oversight development more generally? This came up a little bit in some of the chat on Twitter moments before this episode went out. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. Sorry, we're running a little late, but for once, probably not too late. It's nice, isn't it? What about the oversight development more generally? Or what about oversight development more generally? I have to say, I'm agnostic at best about... oh yeah, someone's pointing out that logo. The RAIB logo is very 2005. Yeah, it's quite a vibe, isn't it? Crikey. It's when everyone was using... I mean, is that Westminster font as well? It looks almost like it, doesn't it? It's quite... yeah, that or Euro style. It's quite flat and stout. Anyway, funny stuff. Right. Yeah, Gary Keane, a third-party overbridge responsibility of owner, not Network Rail. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, what about OSD more generally? Well, I'm agnostic at best. Why? Because, well, for all sorts of reasons. One of them is that we're basically trying to make money for not necessarily great reasons in a lot of places by selling land to companies like Lend-Lease, who in my eye, I don't hold them in high regard, particularly for what they're currently up to at Euston, which is limiting the potential capacity of a massive nationally strategic piece of infrastructure so that they can make a few more bob and possibly notch 5% off the capex, off the kind of net capex of Euston Station. It's pathetic. Yeah. So, for example, here's a cutaway at Euston, and where's this wonderful high-speed railway station? This kind of these platforms that'll be the gateway for passengers arriving into London from the whole country. This bit here, yeah, this space here, this bit, just this little space. Okay, yeah, obviously it goes a bit further that way. But they're going to fit 10 platforms in there. Does anyone have any of these people ever been to Birmingham New Street Station? Don't do this, folks. And in terms of, it's not just okay. So oversight development on stations, I'm basically massively against it. Don't do it. Let natural light arrive. Let there be these. Every station should be somewhere people want to be, not a flipping warren that people are dumped inside to catch trains. And if it is going to be underground, it should be a landmark structure. Not, it should be because it has to be, not because we've inflicted that sort of. There are examples where oversight development can work and it can look good. Just watch the Architecture of the Railways built to see some examples of good underground railway stations. But certainly in the UK, that's very rarely the case, I have to say. And in terms of other places, so for example, depots or or even areas where you've got kind of quite a few tracks in place. As soon as you do oversight development, you're trapping the railway. Land that could otherwise be... Old Common is a great example where land that was a depot is now becoming a massive transport interchange. We're trapping ourselves based on whimsy and chasing reductions in capital costs that we otherwise ought not to do. We don't need to do it. So I have to say I'm sceptical. Every case is different, but I'm generally... I come into any suggestion of oversight development being a good idea as a cynic. Andy Savage, oversight development. See the RAIB report on the development over Northern City branch that put piles through the tunnel, which is after his time at RAIB. Yeah, that's a good example of when not to do it. Don't do a Penn station on it, says Ella. Yes. Memnonia says Berlin Hauptbahnhof is the perfect example of this done well. Yeah, but that isn't oversight development. It's just a big, particularly, it's just a multi-level station. I don't think there's a huge amount of development up top. Yes, so not a huge fan of that. Right, that's it. I've done my yabbering. Yeah, right. Well, stay tuned to find out what we're covering next episode. But I'm gonna get rid of my face. Let me just click some buttons. There we are. Oh, let's get rid of my face. So, thanks for listening and watching, everyone. Particularly those who have listened after the fact. Again, this is another graphic one. I don't know how well that worked in audio only form. We'll answers on a postcard. Patreon, please do think about supporting me on Patreon to do more of these. This was a particularly chaotic one, but hopefully kind of interesting. I don't know how much is actually new information. Well, probably not. Andy's inputs and Tim's inputs are useful. Are probably more useful than mine, but hopefully it's kind of wrapped it into one place in a way that maybe didn't exist before. Plus some kind of nice diagrams that I did myself. Patreon.com/GarethDennis is where to go for Patreon support. Go into the Discord for more chat. I'll put Andy Savage's pictures over there if he sends them over and lets me. Yes, so that's GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord, and then PayPal if you want to informally chuck me pennies. PayPal.me/GarethDennis. Please do. Everyone tells me off for not saying like and subscribe. I always feel weird saying that because I was kind of gruff and huff whenever other people say it on their videos. But I suppose, yeah, you probably should like this and subscribe because then people watch more of these and then it's like a virtuous circle, right? And then I can quit my day job and start working on Canadian light rapid transit projects. No, I'm not going to quit my day job for this, don't worry. Or do worry if you want me to do that. It's not happening. Sorry, I like being an engineer too much. Anyway, right. Next episode 59 of Rail Natter. We're going to talk about the Carmot derailment in detail. I think now that the interim report has come out, it's not got all the answers, but it's going to raise sufficient useful questions for us. There's probably quite a lot we can think about. Invariably, we'll look at the full report when it gets published, but I think we'll have to wait a long time. And while it's reasonably fresh in people's mind, but also distant enough that we can talk about it without upsetting, being generally upset at the idea of it. I think it's good for us to look through this. So I'm going to look through the interim report. We're going to do a page turn, talk about all the things that it kind of covers. I'm going to probably rant about the terrible crashworthiness of HSTs and the fact they shouldn't be on the network anymore. What else? Quite a lot, yeah. But that is next week. And after that is going to be a fun episode again. So it's not going to be all doom and gloom. And then after that, we're going to talk about the thing that's going to be out tomorrow that no one knows about and it's embargoed. So, yes, be excited about that. Anyway, it's still kind of light outside. It's nice. I've had my window open, which means that I get birdsong, which is good. But it means that all of my neighbours get me shouting loudly, which is bad. Everyone, thanks so much for watching. Oh, good grief. Ella, stop spamming the links. Yeah, so... yes. So, where are we? Oh, good, yeah. If you've got any questions... I mean, any thoughts, any questions, any queries... before I disappear off. It's 7 minutes past 8. We've got 3 minutes to make this an hour and 10-minute show. Andy, Gary, Tim, thanks for joining. Thanks for adding your insights. All three of you adding... In fact, Chris Jackson as well. Thanks for adding your insights. Yeah, some very useful stuff there. Andy Savage, particularly, I look forward to seeing those pictures and getting your insights. I'm glad that broadly my description seems to match with what you remember. That's reassuring. Yes. All it remains for me... That's all right, Ellie. You're all right. All it remains for me to say is to sort of wave your cheerio. And if there aren't any questions... I'm not seeing any questions coming through. Gareth Williams... Ned Carlson saying there is snow in Canada right now. That seems strange. Parliamentary petition... Well, anyway, there's lots of chat going on. Is Stuttgart 21 a case of oversight development? Stuttgart 21's a nightmare, that's what it is. I think it deserves its own Rail Natter episode. I need to get someone involved in the project to come over and chat to us about such things. I'm also going to quickly go in here. And good. Yes. Sorry. Right, I'm going to leave you in peace and quiet. No questions have come through. I think it's time to leave you in peace and quiet and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Everyone, thanks for watching this actually reasonably prompt and neat and tidy episode of Rail Natter. I'll see you all. I'll see you all next week. Yeah, I'm waving, but I'm just making sure my stuff is all ready. Yeah, cheerio, cheerio.